Hello and welcome back to Off the Ruck, your weekly rugby breakdown, and it is the 2026 edition, the version that we have all been waiting for. I've been doing some stuff beforehand, but now it's time to talk about the competition that is Super Rugby Pacific 2026, and I cannot wait. And to do it all, I've brought in here Lachie from Scrumbags. Lachie, thanks so much for joining me yet again on the show. It feels good to be back together in the new year, doesn't it?
Mate, it does. It feels right. It's a pleasure to be talking a bit of code again. And now that there's actually trial games going on and we've got results, we've got squads, there's even bits of B-roll and some dodgy live streams you can jump on. It's been really exciting to finally get our claws into a bit of footy.
Oh, mate, it has been a little bit helter-skelter, hasn't it? A couple of live streams gone up and down. One's on Rugby, on Chiefs Pass, one's on YouTube, another one's on Facebook, another one's on a random website. It really is something that probably needs to be addressed, but that's not what we're going to talk about today necessarily, because what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about power rankings, how the Aussie team breakdowns, what those squads look like and what their strategies look like, conference system debate. Is the Australian slash New Zealand conference really, really that good for the competition? And is it bringing out the best in what the sport and the competition has to offer? More for chat on that later. And then we're going to get into the fantasy super rugby game, which is back for another season with a revenge. And I am so stoked that it is, because it was really, really engaging for a lot of people across the ecosystem, and a lot of people that I actually hadn't seen before be as into the players as they were before. Now they were really cheering for the players more so perhaps than their teams, because they picked a lot of Kiwis in their sides. So I'm keen to get into all of this. How are you feeling about this rundown right here, Locke?
Absolutely. There's nothing better than a power rankings. It's like predictions without any of the retribution or any of the, I guess the tension that goes with it. It's flexible. It's variable. We can get pumped up about teams that maybe sometimes we don't have a lot to get excited for. So I'm just keen to rip in.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly where we're going to head. So let's go into power rankings here, Locke. We're going to go from 1 through to 11. And before the ball has even been kicked in earnest, and, the trials are trials, you can't glean too much off that. We're going to go through and rank our number one side. And then we're going to go down to number 11. And I think this is really about squad depth. It's about player rotation. It's about where we feel the power of the sides resides, and obviously the carryover from their form of 2025. So, Locke, you want to give me your first pick? Who do you feel is number one placed in the power ranking ladder?
It's the Hurricanes for me, Fergo. I'm very, very excited about what's going on over in the Windy City. They've got strike weapons across the park. They have seriously good depth in backs and forwards, and the right kind of age profile, I think, to get a bit of that 10-year glory back and push for a 2016 kind of year. Are you along a similar line, or who's yours number one?
Mate, I think it might be the frosted tips might be getting into your head a little bit, as well as the Hurricanes players who have all been rocking the Jerry Collins in a homage to the great man, I do believe. But I think that they are looking really strong. They're not quite as high. I'm looking at another one. I'm looking at the Crusaders, the champs from last year. There is just a strength and a continuity and a reliance on their core foundational values that really, really intrigues me. And still, I'm sorry to say, but at the start of the season, they haven't lost too much, and they've gained someone as deadly as Lester Fainga'anuku. So I'm keeping that there. That they are just in such red hot form, and they are another year down the track with the young players that they've brought through in the second row. Players like Jamie Hanna, Anton Shelfoun has been going great guns last year, and then obviously got the halves combos in Noah Hotham and Revez Rehana, as well as the other one that I am forgetting. I'm completely blanking. What's the other fly half called for
Taha
the
Kemera.
Crusaders? Thank you, Taha Kemera. And no James O'Connor, but nonetheless, they're looking really powerful. So who's your number two? Who's coming in number two?
Well, for all the reasons you just said, it's the Crusaders. They're my number two. You don't win, was it 13 Super Rugby titles of the past 30 years without that kind of culture, that panache? And look, Rob Penny's laughing after being almost dumped after his first year. He's taken them to a title. Like you said, they've only gotten stronger with the addition of Lester Fainga'anuku. And when you think about the quality of some of the core All Blacks, but also just the group of winners that they have, that winning culture, it can't be shaken. So I think we're in for another tough year for those death riding the Crusaders. They're in my top two, and they're second at the moment.
Yeah, no, I think, and number two for me, for all the reasons that you said, the Hurricanes, but mostly because the team that's coming next had a change of coach. So I think the continuity in Hurricanes land in the Windy City is extremely important. And players like Ruben Love, he's another year on. They have got a really, really good foundational side in the tight five. They have not lost anyone. They've actually lost Zach Gallagher, but he didn't get too many minutes last year because he was injured, unfortunately. I had big raps on him early doors, but the Hurricanes just look like a settled side, and they're welcoming back, decorated All Black Geordie Barrett back into the midfield alongside now someone who's further along down the line, Billy Proctor, and they've kept the weapons like Finnegan Nofo and Punivai, as well as they've got Ruben Love, as you spoke about just then, as well as I believe they have Josh Morby back as well, a fullback. So it's a deadly backline. They always, and they have one of the premier number nines in the world, Cam Roigard, leading from base there. So they just feel undeniably powerful, and that continuity that they've had for the last couple of years, where they've just been a little bit off. Also, I think they're going to be able to make those moments matter early on. And if you got a hooker with legs like Asafa Moore, the photo's been doing the rounds, I think you're in for a sweet treat, and that means the Hurricane boys are going to be happy.
Yeah, that's a whole lot of man. I would not want him to be running straight at me. So that's our top two. Tell us your three.
Yeah, three for the reason that I just hinted at. Number three is the Chiefs. I think that they have the really great side. They've not necessarily lost heaps of players, but I just think that change of coaching, that change of style might breathe through into like a little bit of a difference when it comes to being able to implement the new game plan. Of course, they have class across the board to be able to revert back to, but nonetheless, a change of coach can actually be quite destabilizing for a side. So great side on paper, but I just think for that reason, the Hurricanes just sneak on over them. Who's yours, number three?
Well, I'm going to sound like a fool given the trial form that we've seen, but I had the Queensland Reds at 3 for power rankings heading into this prior to a pretty grim weekend at Ballymore. The main reason around age and profile, as we sort of talked about with the Hurricanes, but also the quality that they're starting to build, not just in the back row, which has been a strength for a long time, but particularly in the midfield, when you look at the dearth of fly half options that they have as well, whether they're going to find the right one is the real deal. But I think just across the board, they only have one area of perceived weakness around depth, and that's probably in the loose head stocks behind Aiden Ross. Aside from that, there are stacks in every position at the Reds ready to go. So if you can take your blinkers off for a second and not look at the trial result, I was feeling pretty positive about putting them at 3, but maybe not so sure now. Who takes your bronze? Oh no, of course you had the Chiefs there.
Chiefs.
Goodness gracious. So number
Number
four.
four. We're on to number four. Yeah, we're rolling in hot. And this is where I'm actually going to place the Queensland Reds. They are 3 years down the line now with, I believe, with Les Kiss. Is that accurate?
He's starting his third. Yep.
2024, 20. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so 3 years down the line, that coaching cohort has been really, really stable. And I think now they've added players like Carter Gordon, and they've been able to have Rebels players like Luke Hunsala, Loto, like Josh Canham in there for a little bit longer. And they've just been able to cement kind of combinations like that. I don't think the trial form is really indicative of where they are as a side or what they can produce, but that was a little bit worrying. I think, particularly for people who've been thinking as Les Kiss as the eventual or the incoming Wallabies coach. But nonetheless, they have such a good core of players that have been carrying on through the years. And if you really look at the front row, like you noticed, Massimo Deludis, Zane Nongor, young players, but really, really, really starting now to be able to come to the point where they can handle Super Rugby Pacific level really well, particularly Zane Nongor. He's now a test level prop. He might not be dominating a test level, but he can go toe-to-toe with the best and be able to hold that scrum up. So I'm really impressed with where he is. Front row stocks, yes, maybe a little bit on the thinner side, seeing having lost players like Alex Hodgman and Matt Gibbon, as well as Alex Hodgman. But I do think that nonetheless, the addition of Aiden Ross and the ability to have those younger players behind them, along with JTA, Jeffrey Tumunga Allen, they've got enough starch there to just be able to feather the difficult moments and then to be able to give opportunity to the younger boys to be able to come through and really press their case for bigger moments, bigger selections. And, we've got injuries to Tate McDermott and Harry Wilson early, probably won't be back until after round 5 or so. But there are able bodies like Joe Bryle, like Seru Uru in the back row that can replace Wilson for the minute at Super Rugby level, and then of course Kalani Thomas, and you've got Louis Wershon, who have been playing really good rugby in general when they've had their opportunity. So I think that they've got enough style to be able to plug those holes. But we'll get more into the Aussie sides in a moment. Who's your number four?
Number four is the Chiefs for me. So we've got the same top four, just in little different orders there. I think just with Jono Gibbs coming across, there's going to be a little bit of clunk. But, Clayton McMillan was no slouch. He's taken them to, three grand finals in a row, three deciders. They have so much quality. And I would say their backline is probably the envy of New Zealand rugby, just the depth across the board. It's a big loss without Anton Leonard-Brown. That actually sort of weighed into it for me. His versatility and that experience across the midfield, I'd say on his day, he is the most consistent midfielder going around in Super Rugby. So that's a huge loss for him. But when
Great
you look
shout.
at the quality in their pack too, far out, it's such incredible depth from lock to back row. Aiden Ross will be sorely missed. I'm glad the Reds have picked him up, as we touched on. But geez, they've just got massive. When you're rolling out Arcoy, Tupou Vai, Jacobson, these are seasoned campaigners that know how to win and win well. So I can't see the Chiefs going outside of that top four really.
No, I think you're really right. I think they do have good consistency throughout the pack and throughout the side, and of course Anton Leonard-Brown. But I do think at prop there is an opportunity to expose a little bit of that. They're just lacking that right top end class kind of propping stock, having lost some of that. They have lots of good cohesion, there's lots of good continuity that those boys have played together for a few seasons, but they're just lacking those big names there that they're going to punch through. So that's going to be exciting to see the scrum battle goes for the Chiefs and whether they're able to use that at all as a weapon. Moving into fifth place, who have you got there?
I had the Brumbies. I had the Brumbies at fifth, and trial form again is something that we'll talk a bit later. But even with the key losses of Iki Tau and Tom Hooper and Tom Wright for the season, you really felt as though they still have a good core unit. And you look at the quality of that forward pack when they're fully fit, and I must stress this is fully fit. You're not turning your nose up at a front row of James Slipper, Billy Pollard, and Alan Alatoa. And the depth behind it, particularly around the tight head side, is super exciting. I love the depth that they have in that front row stock. So big bodies, big solid workman-like team. I think that this is probably the exact kind of position that we find the Brumbies in every year. They say, oh, they'll be okay, they'll be there and thereabouts. But Bernie Larkham's too experienced not to keep this side in and around finals. So for me, they're still going to end up at fifth, but I have big questions around the direction of their backline. With Noah Lolesio, I think he's going to be very sorely missed. So they stay in five for me, but I can certainly be convinced that it's going up or down.
Yeah, no, Brumbies for me as well for the reasons you've outlined. But the fact that they've lost the players that they've lost and haven't gained notable, proper Super Rugby Pacific level or higher kind of fellow players to replace them. That's a bit of a worry. So we'll go into more into depth into that a bit later. But yeah, it's fifth for me seems like a spot where they can go just above, or they could really drop a couple of key games and slip a little bit below. It doesn't. They still have the continuity to go there to go the distance, but losing that top shelf class is a worry. In sixth place, I've gone for the Blues just for the sake that Vern Cotter is not going to want to leave that club in a dumpster fire. He's going to want to prove a point. He's going to want to go hard. I'm just unsure. Even with the additions like Offa Tu'ungafasi back into the squad after a neck injury, I'm just unsure. And also Rico Ioane has gone on sabbatical to Leinster. I'm just unsure whether they've got the pieces of glue that will stick that side together through the really tough times, because I believe they have a lot of really good hard battlers, welcoming back Peter Arkey from Toulouse, but I'm just unsure whether it's the right combination of players. Big injuries as well to Bowden Barrett, and I believe the second rower, the captain, the stalwart, Patrick Tuipulotu. So they're going to be without some stars at some places. I think Bowden Barrett's actually more of a promised rest actually per his All Blacks contract, so we won't be seeing him for the first couple of weeks. So you just never know. But I think dropping early games due to injuries like that could be a big problem for the Blues.
Yeah, I feel like you've been copying my homework. I've got them at sixth as well, and it's because of the depth in key positions that I really enjoy seeing. So we look at the class of Bowden Barrett, and yes, he's getting old. He's still a world-class player. I actually think that the Blues often look a lot sharper with Plummer and Perifetta running the show, and Barrett, it can just be that person that covers and provides a bit of, not support around training. Like, he's not just a ball boy, for goodness sake, it's Bowden Barrett. But they are bringing through this new generation, and it's not just fresh faces, but also, like you mentioned, mentioned Peter Archie. I'm so excited to have Peter Archie in Super Rugby. For those who've watched Toulouse in the past, this is one of the world's premier inside centres at club level. He is a seasoned campaigner, and I think that he could be the glue that you mentioned for that Blues backline in particular. Tuipulotu is a huge one to fill. Like, it means that Sam Dowery and those players have to step up and drive this. But I think, write them off at your own peril.
Mm. No, I absolutely agree. It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be a coach and a side that want to prove something to each other in the competition. But likewise, it just depends whether you have if maybe Cotter's flogging a dead horse with what he's been trying to do there. It just depends. It really depends on where that club and that team environment is at. So we'll see. Um, Maybe should have prefaced this before I went to sixth. It's a bit of a three-way battle for me, seventh and sixth. Then whoever doesn't make that out of the three drops back to eight. Because I genuinely believe that the Western Force and the Waratahs are all on that line with the Blues. And for the reasons that I'll outline later, but I just think that each side, and we'll go through them we'll move on soon. So I'll try about them in the reason why, but they're all going to be along that because the Force got one of the best sides they've had age profile as well as top shelf skill and talent in a long while. Meanwhile, the Waratahs have the similar kind of player, but less of a higher profile, more just really grungy, like grunt work kind of dudes that Dan McKellar loves and kind of brought back into the squad. And obviously, Dan McKellar's another year on the line. And I think, Mike, we saw on the trial, and I don't want to take too much out of it, but the ball movement from the Waratahs in the back line looked so much smoother than what it did at any point last year throughout any game. So you can't take that away from them or Mike Cat and they're doing the attack. So I think that Blues, Waratahs, and Force, they're all going to be in a massive hustle to try to be able to nab that last spot.
It feels similar to me, but I'd actually lump in the Highlanders too, and they're kind of my smoky for biggest mover. I don't see them playing finals, but behind the Blues, just in 7, 8, 9, I could honestly roll out Highlanders, Force, and Waratahs all in front of me. I think what we're seeing at the Highlanders is a team that's starting to back their skill and their confidence. I would have loved to see Dylan Pledger, their sort of NPC Otago star, be driving this attack, but they still have an All Black driving that from the Ruck base in Fakatava, and players like Gilbert, Tungi Tau, Tavatava Nawai can really drive the Highlanders and be a pain for Australian teams that tour over there. We've seen too often the Highlanders are actually the team that you go, oh, we're going to New Zealand, but it's the Highlanders, so like we can just bank that. I don't think that's going to be the case this year, so I'm excited to see how they fall. At the moment, I've got for my power rankings the Force in 7th and the Waratahs just behind them in 8th and the Highlanders at 9th. That's kind of where I've fallen with this, but honestly, you could toss them up and fall in a different order, and I'd be happy.
Yeah. So we've got 7th, 8th, 7th, 6th. Now going for my ninth place, and that's where I'm going to put the Highlanders. For the reason that you've outlined, Jamie Joseph, great coach, possibly could be heading into the All Blacks coaching role, and they've added a bit of top shelf talent as well. So they've got Lavanini, the likes of the Argentinian lock. He's going to absolutely add a bit of grunt to that second row, a bit of height as well, a bit of mongrel. Not that the Highlanders are ever short on a bit of mongrel, but again, I'm just unsure whether they have the depth to be able to go the distance when it comes to their travel, when it comes to winning the games they need to away. It just worries me a little bit. So I'm just not quite sure on the Highlanders. Who do you have in ninth there?
In the ninth, I had the Force in 7th, the Tars in 8th, and the Highlanders ninth. So I think I've just about matched you in that
Okay,
regard, and
cool.
it shows us the sort of where we see the different tiers at the moment. Because as we're
Mm,
going to touch on the bottom two, Drua and Moana, there's probably a fair few reasons, and a lot of them are personnel based.
yeah. No, 100%. I think Moana for me are 10th. Just think that I just think that Kana Umanga has developed such a good culture in that group now, particularly with the aid and assistance of Artie Sevilla last year. And that's going to have carried over. And picking someone like Miracle Failangi, who I'm very, very stoked to see as being named as the captain, is a good step in the direction of being able to bring a beating heart and to reinforce the purpose of what Moana is about. Is he's a boy from the islands and he's come through and he's now captaining the Pacifica side. So that's really, really exciting for him. again, personnel, losing Adi Savia, but gaining Nani Laimape, you can influence the game more at 8 and being someone like Adi Savia, statement, end of statement, than you can from 12 and being Nani Laimape. So Laumape is an extremely impressive player, but he's not Adi Savea. They've lost Kyron Tolmofalo, and they've lost both the Inisi brothers as well. They've just lost a little bit of their core group that have been there for a little bit of a while, but I don't think they've lost as much as the Drua, which is why I've put them there. And typically the Drua have traveled worse than Moana, I think.
Yeah, I match you there, and like I think with Savia and the Anisi boys, like that's almost the heart of Moana, so they're going to have to grow that back. But I think the soul of the Drua was Tavita Cannavere, and losing him is an unparalleled blow. I don't think any other team has lost
Yep.
a player that's so
Great
important to
shout.
what they do and what they represent. So you lose a man that is your regular test starter for Flying Fijians, and a
Yep.
man who so often will be the breakout player in general play. He runs the ship at set piece time, and he isn't in. He's irreplaceable, in my opinion, for the Drua. So you throw in the fact that they've got players who've moved across to sevens. I love that they've brought back Vumi Vakatawa. I think
Yep.
that's just the most amazing story. You know, a bloke who had to retire from top flat footy through health, and now he's back in a Drua jersey is just
Mm.
super exciting. But I think it's a race to the bottom at the moment. That being said, I still think we're going to see these teams win more games than the bottom teams did last year. So like if you ever look at the
Yep.
table from 25, the Highlanders finished 10th with only 3 wins, and their bonus points got them ahead of the draw. I can see the bottom team potentially having up to 5 wins, because of
Yep.
the nature of the draw and banking those
Mm.
home games. So I think we're going to see a more congested field,
Yep.
and it's going to be a massive season ahead because any
Mm.
team can still do the business on their day against another
Mm.
one, and I can see Drew and Moana playing Kingslayers for a lot
Yep.
of this season.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a tighter feel about the competition, but there's still very much a tiered system in play, and that's only because the top teams that we're going to get into in a while are just that distinctive way ahead of the other sides. Just to finish on the Fijians, losing an outside center that was Magic Issa for Mussy, busting tackles at
Oh,
will. Celestino Ravatai Monday, top speed and absolute electric, and can do something out of nothing. And then Caleb Muntz, you lose experience, you lose. X factor, and you're losing players that have been there for a very long time. You lost who was the wing? Ravovo, and then who was the other winger that they lost the year before? Um, can't
Oh,
remember,
they
but
lost. He ended up. Oh, well, they also lost Calavati Ravolvo. He went to Bristol, and he's been amazing
yeah,
since he went there. But I think the
yeah,
big one you're thinking of is, oh my goodness, I can see his name flying
I
across my
know.
eyes and can't pick it up. Regardless, he ended up in top 14.
Yeah,
He'll
yeah,
his name will
exactly.
come to us in a tick. You
Yeah,
can tell us in the
yeah,
comments and tell us
yeah,
how we're
yeah,
terrible.
yeah. Let us know. Yeah, let us know. But that's the power rankings. There you can have them. Please let us know in the comment what you guys think about your power rankings. This is without a ball being kicked in earnest. This is just where we feel the power of the preseason, not necessarily the trials, but the power in the preseason and what we've been seeing in the squads lies. So now we're going to move on over to the Aussie team breakdown. Okay, so now it is time to break down the Aussie sides. If you guys want to see this for the New Zealand sides as well from Lachie and I, let us know in the comments below, and then we will do what the people command. But right now, since this is an Australian Aussie Super Rugby Pacific podcast, we're just going to be doing a real bit of a deep dive on the Australian side. So starting off with the side that we have guessed that is going to finish 7th, 6th, 8th, which is going to be the New South Wales Waratahs. And their squad is looking better than it did last year. They have some more experience across the board. What draws your eye here for the Waratahs, Lockie, when you look at this squad straight up? It comes down to coaching, which we'll get to in a second, strategy, but it also comes down to the players who have to execute it.
Two areas that I'm excited at. The depth around outside backs is ludicrous. I think anyone that's looked at that TARS squad will go, how on earth do you build a back three and pick only one on the bench? And it's not actually the Wallabies that excite me. It's the new generation that's coming through. Players like Sid Harvey, James Hendren are really exciting and add to that depth. So I'm excited, and that's going to be a massive area of strength. Obviously, they need to get to ball out there. So who is going to be the player that does that? I think that's the biggest question for a lot of these Aussie sides, at least 3 or 4. And so I'm fascinated to see who runs the cutter in these first few games. Lawson Crichton seems to have the inside line, is what we're hearing. But it's very exciting to see who can unlock that back line. As for the pack, I like the size. I like the size that they're starting to build around the second row. Like Blythe, Phillip, and Amadasero are all massive, solid dudes. So they're starting to get some strength there, but I still feel as though their prop stocks are lacking in the departure of Angus Bell and Taniela Tupou. That's probably where I see their weak link being.
Yeah, so that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to start at the top with the props there. There's only really notable scrummages in Tom Lambert and Isaac Kalia. The rest of them are untested so far when it comes to Super Rugby Pacific. Sure, like we've seen Jack Barrett get absolutely annihilated out of no fault out of his own. He just got selected too early when the Waratahs were going through a nightmare with Waratahs with prop stocks. Their injuries galore in 2024, I do believe. And then Pelosi Ranawai from the Norths Club here in Sydney, Shoot Shield, really, really impressive prospect, really big lad, really potentially dangerous ball carrier, but again, completely untested. Will Goddard, I can't say that I know too much about him, unfortunately. And then you've got Dan Botha, who's very much with that chat that I had with Dan McKellar. Go back and watch it about what he says about him. But in short, he says that he's a completely different footballer from what he was 12 months ago. So really, really exciting to see there. Isaac Kalia, we know, is a Wallaby prospect and a Wallaby tier. And Tom Lambert has been in and around and played Australia A. So those two props are the guys that you're going to be relying on the loose head side, which leaves you again with question marks on the tight head side. So that worries me. But as you mentioned in the back row, it is really, really good with bigger size. I'd like to add Ben Grant into that profile as well, over 2 meters tall, extremely big. How you piece that together with continuity, but also ability to be able to know who plays with who well, that's going to be really interesting to see how Dan McKellar manages. And then in the hooking stocks, they've got almost a completely new hooking stock. Flau Fainga'a threw some absolute hurlers of darts on the weekend, but hasn't always been his strong suit. We're hoping his time in Clermont in French Top 14 is really sharpened that skill up. Ethan Dobbins, absolute workhorse, worked like a dog. And we saw Moananu, what he can do with a bit of space. So a running threat, very, very good, very mobile, built like a bar fridge, but he's really exciting. How you piece together a back row is going to be really interesting. You've got Charlie Gamble there, probably likely at 7. And then you've got Leafi Talataina. Clem Halaholo, not even really, I'm not really sure whether he's signed, but he certainly looks like he's well part of the squad and he's on the book. So that'll be exciting because he is a massive unit. And then of course you've got Pete Samu. So looking at where that again falls in the question of who do you reward, who's played big men's in Super Rugby AU, who plays together well with this team, and who's just got that star-studded power. That's what I'm thinking in the pack. In the back line, they need someone to be able to straighten this attack. That was missing in 2025. And if they don't get it right in 2026, they're going to experience the same pain with little ability to have deception to be able to release the Ferrari and Jorgo and Suali'i, and whether it's Harvey Potter or Kellaway or even Hendren. They just need someone to straighten this attack. And again, they haven't recruited anyone in the midfield who makes me jump out and say, wow, they'll be able to do that.
Yeah, it's a funny one. In the listed squad, they've only named 3 midfielders, and that's what confused me the most because it all but locks in your Ferrari at Suoli into 13, and it's who is his man at 12. Do you pick a ball player like Crichton to support him? Or do you pick the Walton combination was used a lot? I actually quite like George Pullman in the midfield from what we saw through Super Rugby Oz with the Force. He was quite impressive at 13, but still, that's a 13 jersey, and you feel like it's probably the $1 million man. So I think our question is who can underplay their hand to overplay that of others. And I
Yep.
think it's probably going to be like your Debrasini and your Crichton. You almost want them to be stand and deliver and just get the ball as quickly as you can with as much space as you can to these big players. So I'm expecting the style of play, and I think that's where you're leading this. It's going to be a lot of forward work to get up the park, to have the defense backpedaling, to then shift quickly. Because with all these weapons, like you want to see the ball going through the hands in sky blue.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. But you've lost a weapon like Langy Gleeson from which was one of the best ball carriers in the competition. That is a big loss. And I know I've said this several times before on this podcast, but Pete Samu is not the same type of player. He's a much rangier, rovier kind of player who can explode off the mark. but he just is not able to get the same punch in blunt contact. And we know that Lang and Gleeson, that's exactly what he did. So it's going to be interesting. In terms of styles of play, we saw great ball movement with great depth in the back line. And against any defense, whether it's rush or not, having weapons like Jorgo, Suoli'i, and obviously the likes of Sid Harvey, Hendren, and Potter with a little bit of space, it doesn't matter if you're running a rush defense, you are going to be caught wrong-footed if the Waratahs, sorry, can get that depth right throughout the competition, because they were marginal balls against the Reds on the weekend in the trial match, but nonetheless they made them work. So it's going to be really, really exciting. We'll move on now to the Western Force. When you look at this squad here, Lachie, what excites you? What worries you? Where do you think they are?
What excites me is size. This looks like a big pack in particular, and we broke this down on the Scrumbags podcast last week around just deep diving, particularly the ins for this force pack. So you look at the Franco Molinas coming back into the mix. I'm really excited about how they've brought Fal Vatuaka and Sef Fargase across to shore up what's commonly been seen as a weakness of the force, which is that propping stock and that scrum in particular. So they've got some real size around. Hooker is the profile that concerns me a little bit. The injury to Nick Dolly. You've seen Leonel Oviedo come across from the Pumas. I think he's played Pumas XV, but he's not a captain international. Really, it's be in daylight before you hit Bertie Alcock and Oviedo. So that's probably the weak link. But like again, huge timber in the second row stocks. Darcy Swain, Molina, Lepetti Pfeiffer's a big unit too. And then like I absolutely love the profile of having a back row including champion Decrepti Ekuasi and Tazano. Like that's abrasive, and then behind them it's the Katekas. It's this big mongrelly pack, and it feels like they're going to be happy and willing to take teams into a dark place. So that's what excites me. But then the backs, finally we're seeing some real class through the midfield. I love seeing Kurtley Beale and George Bridge and these seasoned players linking up in closer to the action, like being in the midfield, being around this. And we haven't even seen a sniff of Dylan Peach yet. We know how good he was last year. Matt Greeley is my real smoky to shine through 2026. And Ben Donaldson is the man with the most to prove in Australian rugby right now. So I really like the balance of this squad.
It's a really good point you make about Ben Donaldson. He has definitely a lot to prove, and he knows that. And he said so as much himself. It's not a secret that he is not salty, but like wants to get back in the good books in the national perspective, and that means directing this foresight, which is looking really good on paper around the field. Yeah, I'll go back up to the top as well. Fotuaika, Harry Johnson Holmes, and Robertson, along with Fangase, those guys are top tier scrummages. There's no question. Harry Johnson Holmes, Wongtap Wallaby, Sefan Garcia. I think he's been in and around the Australia A squad. Fotuaika played for Tonga. And then, of course, you've got young Marley Pierce on the loose head side, which honestly has done nothing but go from strength to strength at Super Rugby Pacific level. And it was actually the other side of the scrum that was letting them down last year. So really, really impressive prop stocks. That's really exciting. You're right. I'd hook it a little bit looser, but as long as Nick Dolly and Brandon Pangamos can stay on the field and put out a good performance, particularly when it comes to throwing, because if you're throwing to a back line, to a back row of Darcy Swain and Molina, Williams, and Faifua, you are going to win lineouts just like they did last year. That was the best ranked lineout in the entire competition, and there's a reason for that, because Darcy Swain is an elite lineout operator. There is nothing that hurts my heart more than seeing him leave the Australian shores, even though he is such an elite high IQ player when it comes to that part of the game. He knows exactly how to operate a line out with shorter back row, you have to say, with Ekawasi, Carlo Tozano, and Champion de Crepney. But nonetheless, he knows how to utilize those kind of players to be able to get himself up into the air and contest, and along with Captain Jeremy Williams, who's captaining the side again. In the back line, they have a couple of exciting players like Divad Palu and Boston Fakafuna, who's coming through. But again, they have experience in Beale and Bridge. They don't really have a straightening threat. They thought they had that. They did have that with Tompkinson, who's left now, and Matt Proctor. Proctor didn't play a whole lot. Tompkinson did that very, very well for the Force. It's out wide where they're really going to have to to take teams to task with the speed of Darby Lancaster added over from the Waratahs and the strength of Dylan Peach. Ronan Lee kind of hanging around in the background, but I don't see him getting a run ahead of Fakafuna or Palu, just because they've proven to be a little bit more abrasive, even in their short cameos so far. So it's a side that Simon Cron, and this is where I'm going to get into the tactical part, and I'll throw to you here, Lockie. It's a side that is going to have to pick really, really well because once they're in the 22, that pack will take teams to task. They will not do well when they have to defend in their own half. And we saw a glimpse of that despite them getting the dub over the Reds only just. Their defense was staggered and they were not on the same picture. They were not on the same page when it came to defense. Some were rushing, some were holding, some were pushing wide, some were staying. And you want to see, at least in a trial game, the defensive kind of mentality is the same across the board. So it's going to be very, very early in the season when we see whether that's going to be working or not.
Yeah, it was an interesting trial game, that one. Just the basis of seeing the force run at 42-12, it looked kind of like the Red Stars. There were so many errors that the Brumbies made, so they never actually got firing. Even though they found holes, they just couldn't execute on the go. So they've probably got away with one there. And you're right about the straightening threat. I see a really big season for Boston Whakawhenua. I'm not sure if he's going to be the guy at the start of the year, but for a player who's been around the Australian 20 setup since he was an 18-year-old and has been pushing through the Super Rugby 19s. He was captain. He was, I think, their player of the tournament through that alongside maybe Wallace Charlie. He is a nuggety, compact player who goes forward, goes hard, can get that meterage. So I see him being the guy that can take up that mantle potentially at 12 throughout the year. But I think outside of that, we're seeing a big role for Bailey Kunzel. He is quite a big frame as well. He can be that option if they continue to go with a Hamish Stewart at 12. And I think they might, because of what you talked about with the kick heavy option. We saw Donaldson take to the air a lot in the second trial match against the Brumbies, really keen to turn them around, and he does have a big bird on him. Probably compensating for the fact that if you run a back line with Matt Greeley in the 15, which seems likely, he's not nearly as strong a kicking option as having Max Bury back there. So we're seeing big responsibilities for Ben Donaldson out of hand. Nathan Hasty off the ruck base as well. So I'm expecting something similar, taking to the skies, using the kick chase pressure of Peach and Lancaster and that speed and that contact in the air to force errors and play a really strong territory game. I think that will suit the Forces to get teams into an arm wrestle and get them scrapping their way out and making kick errors, forcing knock-ons inside the defensive 22 and using that big dirty pack to drive over and grind teams out.
Yeah, no, I love the way that you described that. It's absolutely accurate. I'm expecting to see a much better pilfering year from Carlo Tizzano. Obviously, we saw Fraser McRae was the king of the pilfer last year. I'm expecting to see Tizzano really work on that aspect of his game because he's already got an elite running game now, and he really has been able to. And we saw it again in the trial against the Brumbies. I misspoke earlier against the Reds, even though they did play against the Reds. I meant the trial against the Brumbies. But yeah, I think that's gonna have to be a bigger focus for the Force to be able to put pressure on other people's breakdown. That will in itself help their fractured defense, which is probably because they haven't played so many big minutes together as a team. When you get the best 15 on the pitch, they actually haven't played too many games together. You've got a Beal and you've got a Bridge, and then you've got if Lancaster's part of that, and you've got a Nathan Hasty coming off. Those guys haven't played a whole lot of games together. Then you don't even mention the other Argentinian, Moyano and Phillipson. Like there's just not great connection there. But if you pick one side and you stick with it, then I think that the Force by round 6 they're gonna find out how they're gonna be doing. Then moving on into the Brumbies side. Look, I'm going to say this before. Like, I'm going to keep this short on the Brums because my feeling is that we alluded to earlier, the addition of Tane Edmed with a completely new style of playing under Steve Larkham and the loss of Lenny Kitau, Tom Hooper, and of course Nola Lucio, it is just going to be that little bit too much loss of IP and identity in that Brumby side for me to be able to feel comfortable that uh, Kane Edmund, incumbent Wallaby fly half, whatever you want to call him, is going to be able to offset that loss of IP. Not to mention the losses of Fatuika as well in the front row. There just feels like there's actually a little bit of fragility in the side that the Brumbies can put out come week 8, come week 9, come week 10.
come round one, they're going to be missing Alan Alatoa. Tom Wright is still a TBC for when he's back from that ACL. So we've both ranked them for power around I think fifth. I think we both ended up with them with.
Yeah.
But really, I think they're going to struggle. We've probably given that power ranking almost reputationally, and I know I have off the basis of the quality they still have in the pack, but without someone to steer. And assert themselves. I think it's going to take Tane Edmund a bit of time, and my gut feeling is that Declan Meredith probably gets that role ahead of him to start with, just because of the
It's what would
continuity
be
with
best for
Ryan
the
Lonergan.
side. It's what would
I
be
think
best for the
so,
side.
yeah.
Absolutely, and it'd only be fair to Edmund as well.
Yes, to give them the best bet, and then it's what do you do without your Len Hitau, your guy? Like, he's one of the best midfielders in the world, and you've also lost Tom Hooper. So we keep going on about it, but there's enough quality across the board, and I immediately look to a fully fit front row, as we mentioned off the top. Linton Nieli, I absolutely love. He'll step up. There's a loose head behind James Slipper. You've obviously got Blake Shot back in the mix too. He's a Wallaby. He's a super exciting prospect. I'm a little more concerned about the tight head should Ala Alatoa stay away. Tavita Alatini is a relatively untested product. We've seen him do some good things, shoot shield level with Ringer, but that's
Yep.
a big step up, right? So I think they've got a great amount of depth across lock and hooker as well. I like what I've seen. We've got three blokes that have all worn gold, Lonergan and Pollard plus Barron and Ozay. And then, Caden Neville. There's no better person I would have in a Super Rugby squad right now than a mid-30s journeyman who's played test level, who's the biggest bloke you've ever seen, who can just straighten you out. I think he's perfect for bringing in that next generation of Harvey Corjukes, Toby McPherson, these guys. It's going to be quality when they put out a full-strength side. It's similar to the TARS, who pulls the strings. And if they can find the right person to hit their line straighteners, which they have in bucket loads at the
Yep.
Brums. You want someone to straighten the line, you hit Feliway, you hit McLeod, you hit Sapsford Anderson. These are all blokes that want to run into, soft shoulders and go straight through.
Yep.
I just don't know who pulls the strings outside of Meredith. I think it has to be, and
Yep.
we'll just see how they go from there.
I agree. And I think that might be a bit frustrating for Tane having moved, having not played as many minutes for the Waratahs in 2025 as he would have liked. But nonetheless, I think it's the best for the side for Meredith to be able to hold that because he did really well when Lachie was out with a couple of, I think he had a concussion at one point, and then I think it might have been a knee or something or other. So really, really good from Meredith. He's got to be there. Think Will Goddard's a big loss for them at halfback. Going from Ryan Lonergan down to Clayton Thorne, I'm just not sure that's the same level of footy IQ there. I think Clayton Thorne has a higher ceiling that he's currently performing at, but it's just Harrison Goddard really had that kind of swagger about him, and and he's had that for a very long time, going back to age grade. So that's a bit of a loss there. Midfielders, you're absolutely right. They can straighten. I'm actually worried about their second row. If either Nick Frost or Caden Neville get injured, that playing Harvey Cord Dukes and Lachlan Shaw as your second row options, possibly having to chuck Tualima in there, it's just not particularly good when it comes to having to brawl with a side like the Crusaders, Blues, Chiefs, Hurricanes. When they have these massive players and they've got them for days. So that worries me, not from a set piece perspective, because I think they're all great, tall line out operators. They're really good. But when it comes to scrum and maul, and then when it comes to carrying and clearing out, that concerns me. So yeah, I'm a bit nervous for the first time about the integrity of the Brums pack. But I'll tell you what, they are perennial overachievers, which is why I've given them fifth.
Yeah, I think like Corjukes and McPherson will be used off the bench. I think a lot. I think your primary rotation, I think, will be Frost, Shaw, and Neville, and they'll be able to move that around pretty flexibly. If Frost goes down, I'm worried about the structure at line out time and having that general there, but also. Yeah, look, for me, you're right about the frame of like Corjukes and McPherson. They're still young. Yeah, they're 21,
Yep.
22. They will get thicker. They're not going to get taller, but they're already, 202 and 198
Yeah.
or something like that. So, like, it's a decent size.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think, look, no better tutors right now than Frost, one of the most athletic second rowers in the world, and Neville. Plus, Lachie Shaw had a
Yep.
really good season last year. I'm
Yep.
impressed with what he can do. I'm really excited to see what's going on for fullback. It feels off the top like it's Andy Muirhead's to lose if they go with our gut feel of Meredith as a
Yep.
playmaker. I don't think they can afford to have Tane and Declan as the 10-15 access. I just don't think
No.
there's enough strike. So
Yeah.
Andy Muirhead for me is exciting, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do decide to give a little bit of a crack down the line to Shane Wilcox just late in games. I love his pace. He's not a particularly physical guy, but he's lightning quick. So it feels like Muirhead for me is the seasoned centurion at the back, and then I don't know, you've got Corey Toole on a wing and maybe a Sapsford, maybe an Oates, some of these guys who are flexible across 13 and 14 like Crichton, Pritchard, these are all exciting options too. So I think they'll be able to jangle together a still pretty solid backline. It's just about who wears what at this point.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm agreeing with you. And then I'm going to head up to Queensland for your boys for the final wrap of the teams before we move on to a little bit of other things, namely this table, or rather the schedule and the draw. But okay, so looking at this prop quality without experience, you've got Aiden Ross, Centurion at Super Rugby level. You've got Jeffrey Tuamanga Allen. I'm pretty sure he would have that many games across the amount of competitions in the world that he's played at, as well as being an All Black, as well as Aiden Ross, of course. Zane Nongor, really, really promising on the tight head side. And like I said, he's come of age. After that, I'm not going to lie, like Massimo Delude is really impressive as well. But George Blake and Nick Bloomfield and Trevor King do not fill me with confidence that they're going to be able to roll over any of the sides when it comes to scrum time. Promising talents, but it's just, again, such a big difference between those kind of players.
They're shorter loosehead. They're shorter quality loosehead. I think there's enough coverage with Nongor, Deludis, and Tumunga Allen, but we saw last year Big JTA had to switch sides and play loosehead a little bit. He has that capacity, but tight head is very clearly his position.
Yep.
It's kind of like when Slips has to go over and pack a tight head, you go, oh, you're a brave man. Like, he can do a job, but it's not where they're going to excel. So
And it's
George
usually
Blake,
at test level as well.
yeah, God, he's tough as nails. So George Blake there as your second loosehead. He was originally a hooker, and he,
Yeah.
he went over and had some flexibility in the NPC level with Manawatu. I am worried because of the loss of Sefar Garce. I think that's their
Yep.
biggest problem at the Reds for the
And
whole
Hodgman.
year. Yeah, and that's notwithstanding the fact that Matt Gibbon didn't play a game.
Yep.
He might have maybe a preseason thing, but he was stuck and had to medically retire. So was Hodgman, and Fergase's gone. So that's your three premier tight heads that were supposed to be there last year, and loose heads rather,
Yep.
and they're all gone. So
Yep.
yeah, Ross is key to everything. We've said it on our
Yep.
platforms, but you got to cotton wool the big fella and
Yep.
don't let him anywhere out of your sight.
Yeah.
I think they might actually have to do a bit of mid-season recruitment if
Yeah.
Blake struggles to match up, or if
Yep.
JTA doesn't switch across. I think they have the depth that they can probably afford JTA to play as that 17 and that backup
Yep.
loosehead, but also you've got to manage Ross's minutes. You can't expect props at super level to play 80 week in, week out. We know that they can,
100%.
but they shouldn't. So that's
100%.
a massive area of concern for me. And honestly, it's the only area of concern when I look at that pack. The pack is
Yep.
solid. It's really, really solid. I think they're probably short a more grafty, gritty second rower. But hooker stocks, you got two Wallabies in the mix there, plus Asiata was probably the best of the three from last year. You look at the back row when Wilson's back even in the mix. I think Joe Bryle, John Bryant, Viota Latu all have great raps to go with McWright. I'm keen to get your thoughts on the red second row because like Canham and Salakai Loto seem like the standouts, but I feel they're down a real drudger, and I think they're really going to miss Ryan Smith.
I was just about to say that. I cannot understate how important a Ryan Smith would have been in that second row. That means you can rotate Lukan Salakailotu and Josh Canham. That means that you can keep the competition high. The way that I'm looking at it now, that is going to be your second row combination week in, week out. And I don't think you can afford to rotate, honestly, because both of them are so integral for different reasons. Lucan for hit up potential, because you're not getting that from McWright, and you're probably not getting it from your six if Joe Bryle's not playing number six because Harry Wilson's not in yet. So you only really have two big carrying threats in your pack for the Reds. That's not to say that it's not a great pack. It's actually probably the best pack of any Australian side when they're fully fit. But it's just becomes a worry when you start looking at the second row. And again, like the Brums, if you lose Luton or you lose Canham, you are kind of trying to clutch at straws to be able to make the same impact with those players. Likewise, in the back row, I like where Joe Bryant is. I like where Joe Bryle is, but and the addition of Latu is really, really reassuring as well. But this is Super Rugby we're talking about. You're going to be going up against the Luke Jacobsons. You're going to be going up against the Summer Penny Finals. You're going to be going up against, the Kanathai Vatas over at the Drua. These guys are absolute monsters. And I just think that you need to be real about where the depth is. And the Reds are good to one man deep in every position, except for tight end prop that we've just mentioned. After that, it starts getting a little bit thin.
Yeah, I see a really big year for Lato. I've got massive raps on him. I'm a little bit biased. I had very limited involvement coaching him through school, and I promise he didn't learn anything from me. But like this bloke is huge. He's a massive fella. He really established himself through Super Rugby Oz after getting a crack against the Wild Knights as a late call up in that tour game. And he is the size profile of an 8 in Super Rugby. You're looking at a bloke that's a $1.15, a $1.20. He's got the right height, and he probably carries better than Wilson. Like we've seen Wilson carry relentlessly, but he is a target. He runs upright, and he hinges at the hips and allows people to have a perfect chop at him. Latu runs more angular. He's able to get a shoulder through, and I think that he could have a really massive year with Wilson still dubious, and them trying to figure out the best back row balance now that there's no Liam Wright to lock things down. Another bloke that you can't overstate the loss of, particularly around set piece. So I think they're really going to miss Wright as a line out option too when you look at the breakdown of this. But I think if we're going to pivot to the backs now, we probably have to for time races.
Yeah.
There's so much quality. I just don't know what the makeup is. Give me a sense of this back line.
Yeah, I mean, if you're picking a side that's going to go out round one that know how each other play and have got the strike weapons to be able to put sides to bed and also to be able to make sides think twice before rushing them and really have a think about their defense, you're picking Tate McDermott, Tom Liner, Hunter Paisami, Josh Fluke, Felipe Daungunu, and Lachie Anderson with old mate at the back, Jock Campbell. That is your side. That is your back line. For continuity's sake, they've all played lots and lots of games together. There's strike, there's power, there's brute force, there's tactical nous. There's enough ball playing potential between Liner and Jock Campbell, as well as being able to put good tactical kicks in, whether it's for length or not. That's exactly where you want to be. Obviously, Kalani Thomas switches in for Tate McDermott because he's injured until at least round 5, I believe. And then you've probably got Tom Liner there for game 1 because Les Kiss has been kind of a little bit coy about that. But if not, I think, honestly, you have to go Carter Gordon because you haven't signed him not to play him. And it's a different story with Tane Edmed because I know that you've got Harry McLaughlin-Phillips there, but I'm still dubious about his ability to steer a team. And you've got Carter Gordon there. And if you're Les Kiss thinking about who you're going into the Wallabies camp, you want to know that you've given Carter Gordon enough opportunities to be able to play. And so I think that's just naturally where he's got to come in. How does that look to you? Because from a tactical perspective, the Reds have to be better with their kicking. And I put that to Les Kiss in my interview with him. You can go back and watch that. They are a team that had the second best strike rate in the 22-meter zone, apart from the Crusaders. The Crusaders scoring 3.5 points per entry. The Reds were 3.2, and they were miles ahead of anyone else. So they have to get into the 22, and that means their liner has to be fixed. And I think they've got the players to do that, but they just have to kick better because otherwise they're going to be wasting their talent in the midfield, which they did a lot, throwing the ball around in the middle of the park.
The kicking narrative in Australia just frustrates me, and it particularly pertains to the Reds because teams that kick well and often win championships. The Crusaders kick the leather off the ball. They kick more than any team. We go back through the list of winners. We see how successful that model is. I think if you've got Tom Liner, if he's fully fit, and we're not sure if he's fully fit yet, we haven't seen him in a trial. They're keeping it fairly hush-hush. But if he is fully fit, you've got to pick him and you've got to back his boot. He has the best tactical boot out of the three of them by far. I like that McLaughlin-Phillips has the IP of a couple of seasons, but I think Kiss is also in a tough position with Gordon, as you alluded to. Like there is probably some expectation that he gets a crack if you've brought him back across from league and he's already been in the Wallabies setup. He needs to get minutes. So how you balance that isn't our concern. Luckily, we can just sit back and poke holes in it. But you're right. We're going to see more kicking. I would love to see Dre Pakaho get more time at 12. Hunter Bassami is great, but I would hazard that Pakaho had some bigger games and better games and is in a position where he could seriously start shaking up the midfield standings in Australian rugby. So lots to like about that. Jock Campbell seems like the most sensible and the only outstanding fullback. The ace up the sleeve is Trayvon Pritchard. What a talent. What a talent that we're seeing. He's done it at sevens. He's done it on tour games. This is a kid that was leaving players like Sid Harvey and Harry Potter for dead in a trial match. He's only 18. Is he the kind of player that could suddenly pop up as an option for this Reds team in Super Rugby?
He's extremely exciting, and I'd love to see him, be part of a squad. I think it's just about biding your time and seeing how he goes in training and kind of feel out how he goes physically with the game. We know that he can leave anyone for dead, but when it comes to the tram tracks and having to tackle an opposition winger, making smart decisions, 2-on-1, how is he going to handle those situations? There's no question with ball in hand, he's ready. It's just whether he's able to kind of have the IQ to be able to be mature about the decisions he has to make with kicking, because obviously they're a lot better at kicking at Super Rugby level they're at age group, and then obviously defensively, how is he going to manage those pressure moments? So I want to see him, and I no doubt we will see him, but it's just about picking the moments for him to be able to explode onto the scene. He's not quite a Max Jorgensen in the way that he kind of read and watched the game. He's very much a hot stepper like Kalen Ponga was back in the day. So we'll see how he treks. Now we're going to take you guys straight to the conference talk and also about what the table and the draw looks like. So we'll see you there. Okay, so Lachie, the thing that I think a lot of people on both sides of the Tasman and across the Pacific, all the way to the Fiji and Drua side, is have had a little bit of a bone to pick with this conference system that we have. And maybe people haven't fully understood what it is. There is an Australian conference and there is a New Zealand conference. So the Australian sides play each other, inclusive of the Fiji and Drua, play each other twice. And then the New Zealand sides, inclusive of Moana Pacifica, play each other twice. And then they play 4 games outside of that, I believe. Is that correct? 4 games? Yeah, four games against the opposite conference. So the Brumbies will play 4 New Zealand sides, inclusive of Moana Pacifica, or Hurricanes will play 4 Australian sides, inclusive of Drua. And so that's the conference system, and that obviously means that the Australian sides meet the New Zealand teams less. Now, I want to get your take on this. I don't want to put any words in your mouth. I don't want to lead this in you. What do you think about this kind of conference system?
Oh, I hate it. I didn't like the conference system when it was introduced in, what was it, 2011, I want to say, was when they started doing like the Australia, New Zealand, South Africa conferences. Then expansion went bananas, and we had situations where you'd only meet one South African team in a year, or weird situations like that. I think for the integrity of the competition, an ideal Super Rugby looks like a full home and away season, but obviously restricted by time, and then you need to manage travel requirements within that. I think they're trying to do the best with what they've got, but it really does disadvantage some teams. Like if you're the Highlanders or Moana, you're looking at this season, you're going, how? Like that's not fair. Like I'm going back and forth and getting slammed by the Chiefs and the Canes, in successive weeks, and we do that twice. Like it is tougher off the basis of the quality that we've seen so far in this era of Super Rugby. At the same token, like I'm not sure what else can be done aside from extending the season into a full home and away. And then you're looking at 20 games out and back, and you're sort of getting into NRL, AFL levels. I'm all for it because it's more footy, but I'm just not sure what's possible. So, yeah, what's your take on the conference style?
Well, yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. I don't think that it doesn't benefit teams like Highlanders, and it definitely benefits teams like the Waratahs and the Force who don't have to play the Crusaders home and away, or that they might actually have to, but they don't have to,
Yeah.
but that could be the situation. And so what I think is really interesting is like where this falls for the New Zealand sides, likewise with the Australian sides. But just to put it in perspective, the Chiefs have 3 of their 4 games against Australian teams in Australia. So they only have 1 game against an Australian opposition in New Zealand. So at home, sorry, at home. That's tough on them. On the other side of the scale, the Hurricanes and the Highlanders only have 1 of their 4 games against Australian oppositions in Australia. The rest of them, they all play against them at home. So huge benefit to the Canes and the Highlanders, which is, good for the Highlanders, but that's you've ranked the Hurricanes as like one of the top sides or the top side, right? So, or the top side, yeah. So then that's a huge advantage to them. The Blues, 3 out of 4 games, like the Chiefs, are going to be at home. So, oh no, sorry, no, sorry, in Australia. So that's a disadvantage to the Blues. And then the Crusaders, half of their games are going to be in New Zealand, half of their game at home, and then half of their games going to be in Australia. So, that will dictate the power rankings as well, vice versa. And I haven't done the numbers on the Australian sides, but in short, it's 11 sides. There's 2 buys. So that means that each team there's 16 rounds. That means only each team plays 14 games. Now, as you mentioned, a home and away for 11 teams would be 22 weeks. Now, if you had 2 buys in there, which wouldn't really work with the whole system, you'd have to put a buy in somewhere. So you're looking at close to 24 weeks for the competition, as is if you were to do home and away. And we just don't have those windows. And I think already there's been a little bit of concern that that's been moved forward, and it's so hot in places like Perth and Brisbane from a player welfare perspective. So maybe you play those games earlier if you were to start it earlier in New Zealand, and you start the competition in New Zealand where it's a bit cooler. There could be ways you could explore it, but I just want to wrap that by saying that it is really an unperfect system in an imperfect competition. Nonetheless, this means that there's no excuses for the Australian sides to really make a good fist out of it from a perspective of being able to play to their potential, because they're not playing as harder oppositions. Word from you lot?
Yeah, I agree with most of that, but also something that we probably didn't touch on off the top is the main driver for this outside of time is also the commerciality. If for Kiwis to attend games, they want to see derbies. Australians know that they want to see Australian derbies. They're more competitive. You have more affiliation. And while we get bigger crowds for Kiwi teams playing here, we know that when Australian teams travel to New Zealand in Super Rugby, you get poor crowds. So it's not just the fact that they're keeping travel down. It's not just a conference-based system based on geography. There is a commercial aspect of this that says our numbers want derbies. So therefore, let's give them more.
Yep.
If you have Kiwis complaining that, oh, we don't get to play the Australian times, you also need to turn up to those games as a fan. So
Yep.
you're never going to get a home and away, or you're never going to get the Brumbies coming out twice in a season to different parts of New Zealand. And I've kind of lost my train of thought there. But the point is, if you keep getting bad crowds to Australian games in New Zealand, you will not have those games played. It's a disincentive. So you can't really have your cake and eat it in that regard. Like we're seeing New Zealand teams play these harder games at home and away against each other and their neighbours, but there are commercial reasons for that too. So it does complicate things when you want to consider a home and away series.
Yeah, no, definitely something food for thought. And let us know what you guys think, guys. That's why we're here. We want to hear from you guys. Let us know in the comments below what you think about the conference system, how you think it benefits one side or another, one conference or another. Let us know, because we do think that it is a little bit sus. And obviously it limits travel, which is great for someone like the Force have a better draw this year, and we haven't had time to go through a draw. Maybe we'll do that at a different episode. But yeah, we'll get into that. Just to wrap up today, Lachie, we'll go through fantasy. Hallelujah, fantasy is back, and thank God they have made players more expensive, because I've had a little bit of a fiddle with the side, and I have definitely not been able to pick all the best players like I was last year and have money over. I'm sitting at about, maybe I've had to let go of 3 top end expensive players, and I'm still having to put players maybe fourth, fifth down the line in other positions to be able to make my budget work. I think it looks really good, and I think it's improved. Still some things that need to work on, but how are you feeling about fantasy overall?
Oh, just stoked that it's back, and I'm really excited that they've introduced variable pricing. It's not like an Oasis ticket. In this case, it's actually fun to engage with because we've got some rewarding of form. And also, if someone's value is dropping on the score sheet, that's mirrored in fantasy now. So you can't get away with just having a low value player that's suddenly gone gangbusters and you keep them there. That's quite an exciting part of the update that they've introduced. I just like the way that engages people with other teams that aren't their own. So, you and I will know Aussie teams slightly better than we know the Kiwis. Moana and Fiji and Drua are a constant work in progress for us to know exactly what's going in and out. Fantasy is a means for us to engage with that meaningfully, as well as on the weekend, and get a feel for the stats and the consistency of these players as well. Obviously, it's not the best reflection of what's going on, but it's really helpful and it's fun. So I'm keen to sink my teeth in. We did a little bit of the research into the top Australian players that's gone up across Off the Ruck Instagram as well. Carlo Tizzano rightfully at the top of that poll after the massive year that he had. But there were some interesting people in the mix there. I really liked seeing players like Ione Moanana rewarded for their Crusaders form. Charlie Cale is the what could be player, the what if player at the Brumbies because of how well he did probably based on his 2024 stats, and they've carried that through. So it's a great way of sinking your teeth into some preseason action.
Yeah, and it also just gets you start thinking about because there are some stats that are available to the public via Rugby Pass that you can go through and check out. So it brings you closer to the action. It gets you nerdier. It gets you nuffier about the rugby that's being played. But also, there's people like my mates, like they were like, "Oh my god, Caleb Tangitau, how good's he?" And I'm like, "How the heck do you know who Caleb Tangitau is?" Like, there's no way. Like he plays for the Highlanders. You only watch Waratahs games when we like playing the Reds or some stuff, and they're just like, "Yeah, he's in my fantasy team," and I'm like, "Okay, that's freaking awesome. Like
Yeah.
that's exactly what you want." So I'm really stoked. The mechanics. The price matching, awesome, great. And if you want a best bargain pick, the Scrumbags Instagram page have already done an absolute great job at highlighting how cheap Harry Johnson Holmes is. And I tell you what, he was rolling the Brumbies on the weekend in the scrums. So bring him into your side. If I can tell you anything, he's a guest of the pod. He's a friend of the pod. I had him on. Go back and watch that one with him. He's an absolute legend. I actually played against him a few times, funnily enough, growing up. Not that I scrummed against him, but yeah, we had a good chat. We had a good
Yeah,
catch up.
packing that at two, I reckon, Fergo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was at hooker. Yeah, that's right. But yeah, so get your hands on Harry Johnson Holmes, but also do your due diligence. There is nothing worse, and this is what I found out last year. Use your boosters early. Okay, I'm not taking the piss. Like, be bold and use them because I waited too long, and then all of a sudden, everyone was picking the people that was making big money, was making big points, and you can't make that up later. So be bold, go hard, chart your own course. I'm getting a bit prosaic now, but get it up. So
It's great, and
yeah.
if you've got your fantasy things firing, make sure you do jump across and have a peek at us on Scrumbags Rugby Fantasy. We're currently in the top 5 leagues going around as well, so we'd love to have more people involved. We know John gets into it; he's always up there and about the top. So we're really excited to have a crack in 2026.
I was there in the end. In the start, I was just battling. I was like, I'll keep my powder dry. Don't keep your powder dry. I mean, maybe it'll change with this pricing, but this variable pricing, but we'll see. Lachie, thanks so much, and I hope all you guys watching here today have got something great out of this preview. I know it's been a long episode, but it's this one is the forever green episode that you guys can go back to and maybe ridicule for us for it, or also you can just give us big pats on the backs and big raps for how well we called it. From the power rankings, the deep dive on the Australian side, to the conference chat, and now the fantasy chat. Make sure you engage with us online, whether it is here on the Off the Ruck YouTube channel. Like, subscribe. It's really, really important that you like and comment. That boosts the algorithm. And if you like what we're giving out, then we can give it to more people as well. Don't forget to head over to the Scrumbags Boys on Instagram, putting out the best rugby content in Australia. That's for damn certain. And also don't forget that they have a pod as well with Mitch. So, Lachie, thanks so much for coming on. It is always a pleasure. And being able to bounce ideas and chat rugby with you is always such a damn good time.
It scratches the nuff itch. I can't wait. We've got one more trial. It's, I think, Thursday, Tars and Brumbies, and then we're looking Friday 13th. We're ready to roll.
It is rock and roll. It's Let's Trot. So to all you guys, like, subscribe, and I hope that you guys comment and let us know what you think. And if you want a New Zealand edition of the deep dive, let us know and we'll get to that as well. But otherwise, to all you guys, we'll see you on the next episode of Off the Ruck, your weekly rugby breakdown 2026 edition. Let's go.